Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.
Welcome, everyone, to HR Studio Podcast. I'm Fred Bunsa. I'm your host for today's episode, and over the next 25 minutes, we're going to explore the topic of organizational culture, why it's important, how to activate it, and ultimately, what we want to talk about is how to build what we would call a culture advantage into your organization. And joining us in that conversation is our thought leader for today, Josh Levine. Josh, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Josh is an educator. He's a designer. He's an author. Above all, though, he's on a mission. And that mission is to help organizations design their culture so that it actually is an advantage to them. He leads something called Culture LabX, which is an international nonprofit. And also he leads an organization called Great Mondays, which is a culture design agency. He has a new book also called Great Mondays, and that teaches organizations how to design a company culture which employees love to be a part of. He's done writing for Forbes and Huffington Post, Fast Company, and the Design Management Journal. Josh, welcome to HR Studio Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So Josh, I want to jump into culture because that's your expertise, but I also, you come to this space from a non-HR background. Give us just a minute on the quick journey. I think you were in the marketing, graphic design world, and now you're a thought leader in culture, and that's really cool. And I love people who come at this from a different angle. Give us a minute on how that journey happened.
Yeah, so for almost a decade, I was a brand strategist, and the brand strategy is really around helping organizations understand what their story is and then communicating that to the world. At a let's say a crisis moment in my career, I had the chance to think about kind of where I wanted to apply my talents and how I was going to be able to do more, have more impact on the world. And what I realized is that if we were going to get organizations to actually deliver on the brand promises that we helped them create, or I had helped them create, it was really going to be the people inside that were going to have to understand why they were in business and get them engaged in that as well. And that set me on my journey to delve deep into culture and understanding how to really get people on board. And so now what I do is I use those tools that I've learned through brand strategy and design to help organizations design their cultures, take a creative and proactive approach as opposed to waiting for it to go south and someone going, oh my God, we had to, now we have to pay attention. Things are not as we had hoped.
That's awesome. So it's before the wheels fall off or there's a crisis, step back, pause, and actually construct the culture that will best achieve the mission and best attract the people who you need to fulfill that mission.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, do you have a definition of culture or even why is it even so important that, we don't really focus on it probably as much as we should?
Yeah, so a lot of questions in there. So my definition of culture is it's the cause and effect of every choice that we make inside of an organization. And I think it is the point of that definition, while maybe less complete than something that you might find on the on dictionary.com or something, is to help people understand that the point of culture is to influence behaviors and to do it in a way that is good for both the employee, not coerce employees to like work harder or something, right? Like it's actually to support the company and the people who make the company run in the work that they do. And that way they can be empowered to make better choices.
Okay.
And that leads me to why culture is so important. It is the underpinning of all organizations today. And I'm reporting in live from the future, which is Silicon Valley. Like, this is kind of the pressure cooker of capitalism, for better or worse. And what we're seeing here is that organizations are, I think like you said, most pertinently thinking about how do we find the right talent by improving, and they think about improving their culture. But it is becoming what I believe is the only sustainable competitive advantage in business today. And the reason why is because it can't be stolen and it can't be copied. And it is the operating system of a business. And that, to me, is why this is such a high leverage point. Innovation is really important, and recruiting, great recruitment is important, and all these things. But it's, to me, we've got to get the culture right. We've got to understand why we're here, how we're supposed to work together, what are the implicit agreements, and support those in all sorts of ways. And that way, a company is set up for success, sustained success over the long term.
Yeah, and I guess the fact that so many people struggle with what culture is and how do you build it, and I know you have some components of culture. I want you to identify those for our audience of rising HR leaders. But I suppose it's one of the reasons that it's so important to get right is it's so important to figure out that it's hard to replicate, and a lot of most companies probably don't do a great job with it. So if you can get it right, it feeds off itself, it sustains itself.
Yep.
I mean, it takes care and feeding, I know, but it's really hard to do. And so if you can get it right, it really is a huge advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost say, like, I had worked and have worked with a number of founder engineer driven organizations, and engineers like to solve a problem and then let that problem be solved and move on to the next one. But culture is not a problem to be solved, right? It is something to live. It is the journey. And so it is moving it in the right direction, continuing living it. So you can't just say, all right, we're going to nail our values and then that's it. It's really something that needs to happen and become, I believe, of a strategic executive level business function. It's not like, okay, everybody, this quarter, we've solved finance, right? Like, it's not like that. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet I guess we can think of it as, we did the culture thing. We've got our values. We got a clear mission statement. It might even be a good one.
Yep.
The question is how do you build it into the everyday thinking?
Exactly.
And what'd you say? It's the cause and effect of every decision. And so how do you create something that guides everyone in their thinking without predetermining things? So
exactly.
So what are some of those components that your work and your research have led you to see as critical to building culture?
Right. So I'll pick up right where I left off with the definition. So when I first got into this 10 years ago, I was like, okay, what is it? We're going to define it. and it was like, okay, I kind of figured out the system, but then, like, now what? Like, what is it? So I, with some of my colleagues, went in and thought, okay, what are I don't know, whatever metaphor you want to use, levers or dials? Like, what are the pieces or the ingredients of culture that we can actually go in and have an effect on? And that's how I came up with the system that I talk about in the book. In all of my work, I apply with my clients as well. And so 6 components. There are 6 components, and it is a virtuous cycle, we'll say.
Okay.
And the first 3 components are all about the design of the culture.
All right.
It is all about setting that intention, and it's purpose, values, and behaviors.
Purpose, values, and behaviors. Okay.
Yep. Purpose, values, and behaviors. Purpose is your North Star. This is why we're in business beyond making money. This is our why, right? If you're a fan of Simon Sinek, that's your why. The next is values. Values are your how. These are the guardrails that you're going to set for all employees and saying, on our way to achieving this purpose, here are the boundaries in which you can operate.
Okay. And they can be wide enough that all kinds of diverse people, diverse
Yep.
backgrounds can thrive there.
Yep.
There actually is a boundary. You can actually go outside the lanes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that it's really important. And there is an art to thinking about how to, for your organization, uncover the unique and differentiated values, because I'm sure you've seen, and everybody out there has seen, more than their fair share of common values across organizations. You come into the next company, you're like, oh, you're also for integrity and innovation, I see. Right?
Yes.
Like, how does that differentiate you? So that's what we try to do with our clients, is really say, okay, what is it that you're working on? What is it that's going to be differentiated? When you bring in potential employees, it's like, why should I be here? And you're like, here's what we value. Here's why we're different.
Yeah.
So when you align those two things, that's when you get to those behaviors, right? We talked about that before. Behaviors are the center point, the cause and effect of everything that you do. So you have your purpose and you have your values. That's going to help every employee understand how to make better decisions.
Back to values for a second, Josh. When you're working with organizations to define those, are you looking for, like, what is there already that we may have just not called out or identified or recognized, or are these aspirational values as well that we're not there yet, but we want to get there?
Here's the way. That's a great, very insightful question. Here's the way that I approach it. You only get a certain number of values, and that number is 5. None of my clients get any more than 5 values.
Oh, come on. We want 6. We want 9.
No.
We want to appeal to everyone.
You get 3 to 5. Okay. So let's set some precedent here. You get 3 to 5 values. And the reason why you limit those is because it is an exercise in prioritization.
Okay.
If everything's important, nothing's important.
Yeah.
So I force that conversation to happen. Okay. You have to make some hard decisions. Now your question is it something that exists? Is it something that we're working towards? If your organization is awesome at something, it is a core tenet. So we are in the process of working with a high growth, high tech organization here in the Bay Area. They are amazing at actually diversity and inclusion. They are a leader in this. And diversity and inclusion is a part of one of the values. But when I told them that that's not going to be one of their values, everybody was like, wait, but that's a defining feature. Like, you guys already have it. Let's think about the things that you want to grow into. What are you stretching towards? And so what I hope to achieve is kind of a balance between some of the things that you are currently working on, that, like, you think about what's really good. What are some amazing people that work there? Who would you like to replicate? And then also, let's stretch it forward a little bit. What would you like to be better at? What is going to define the business in the future? Because the problem is that most organizations don't think about their values as evolving. They think about them as truths that will stand forever.
Okay.
And that may not necessarily be true. And so that's what I hope to do is, like, and it can't be so far forward, this like stretch that it's like nobody would believe it. So it's got to be this, like, things we're working on, things that are going to be hard, things that are challenges for us now, and things that we'd like to be working on more in the future. And that has become what we've seen as really powerful balance of kind of values that you want to be.
I've been doing some work in our coaching around deliberate practice, and there's this sort of sweet spot of pushing people to excel at a higher level, and making it challenging enough that it really stretches them, but not so challenging that it's impossible and
that it breaks them.
That it breaks them. And so it sounds like what you're saying with these values is they have to somehow resonate with what you are right now, but they can also be aspirational and push you forward.
If they're done well, they will resonate, and they will resonate as something that, like, oh wow, that is something that we aspire to.
Okay. So purpose, values, behaviors, those are the design elements. There's 3 others, it sounds like. What are those?
There are recognition, rituals, and cues. So just
recognition, rituals, and cues.
Recognition, rituals, and cues.
Okay.
So just because you've defined a clear, powerful purpose statement and uncovered those amazing values, and you put them up on the wall, doesn't mean that your culture is going to change one iota. right? Just because it's up there doesn't mean anything. So you have to actually live it, right? So we just
You
talking.
don't get credit for putting up on the wall or giving everyone a triangle for their
Well,
desk.
you get half credit, right? Like you got the first three, but now you can do the second three.
I always got half credit. I never got full credit. Okay.
So the second three, when you think about how do you actually get organizations to deliver on this, you have to go through and figure out where those leverage points are. So the first one is this idea of recognition and rewards. Now, not a new idea, but what I will say about recognition and rewards, and I have a model around like the different kinds of recognition and rewards that you can do. But the number one problem that most organizations mistake that they make when it comes to rewards is they reward and recognize the output. So the sales numbers, right? Like everybody knows that the sales team has this incredible, end of the year party and people get trips to the Bahamas because of how much they've sold.
Right.
But let me ask you a question. Do you think that what Wells Fargo would be in the situation they are today if they didn't explicitly incentivize economic activity, opening false or fake bank accounts?
Yeah.
Right?
No, they would not be here.
They would not be. Now, I'm not under the illusion that you're going to stop rewarding your sales folks, that they're motivated by that. But what you need to consider and how you actually change your culture in the positive direction is you need to reward and recognize values-driven behaviors. The how. You recognize the how. And that is the shift that I want all your listeners and everybody that I talk to, whether they want to listen or not, to change. That's what we want to do. How do you, what does that mean? How do we do that? How do we reward those things?
So is it really that of your 6 components, what you're saying is the recognition and reward has to be to number 3, those same behaviors, or are they other behaviors?
No, that's exactly right. They are rewarding and recognizing the kinds of behaviors we've defined. Okay. When we define the values, part of what we do is we say these are the kinds of behaviors that this value elicits. Now we want everybody, we can't define all of them. Right. Like everybody, who's going to be at the front desk versus the janitor versus that, right? Like they're very different behaviors for folks. But we give you examples and we say, this is what it looks like. And then we need to figure out a way to regularly, not just once a year, regularly reward and recognize those kinds of behaviors and instill that kind of acknowledgement amongst our peers and our leaders.
Can you give us an example of a value that and a few behaviors that it translates into, just so we can think it through on a practical level as an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back to this because it's on my mind, my client. I'll go back to the high growth client. So one of their values that we help them define is called ACK and OWN. And ACK and OWN is short for acknowledge and own. And it is a reference to actually a feature of their product where a developer or an engineer will get a warning and they have to push a button that says ACK. I acknowledge and I own this. Okay. So we uncovered through our work that the company, that a lot of people at the organization, they didn't own the things. And so by bringing this forward, we can say this is something we're working on and we want people to be rewarded on these things. So what is a kind of behavior that is about acknowledging and owning this particular thing? So I get a task, or there is a task left on the table from a conversation and someone says, I will take that. I'm kind of underwater this week, but I'm going to do that and I promise to deliver it next week. So that is going to be a perfect example of acknowledging and owning that kind of behavior. Now, stretch it even further and you say, you guys, last week I wasn't really present and I made some ill-advised comments in the meeting and I really apologize about that. Acknowledging and owning my behaviors. So you have one value that actually is talking to a couple different things, and that's the power. And this is the brand Josh coming through. When you think about a brand story or like a pillar or something, or example, for example, it can apply to a couple different things. And that's great as long as you are consistent about what you're. Akanon, great job. Thank you for that. That was a mistake. The CEO made a mistake when she, launched something last year. She stood up in front of the entire company. She's like, I own that. That's my issue.
Interesting. Okay. So, and in this particular example, I know this is just one practical example, but ACK and OWN another organization could call that accountability. It sounds like. Yep.
Sure.
Because they're taking things on, they're promising to deliver, and then they're also admitting when they drop things, they acknowledge it and they own it.
But what's beautiful, yes, absolutely. You can all sorts of synonyms.
I love the duality there of not just I'll take more on, but I'll also own up to the things that I didn't deliver on in previous commitments.
What is powerful about this one and the way that we phrased it, because we live in synonyms and try to we think about what's the best, differentiated, it connects directly to their product.
Interesting.
And the engineers were like, oh yeah, that's it. That makes sense. That resonates.
Yeah.
And so the way we phrased it helps.
Yeah. Accountability wouldn't resonate anywhere near with this organization as ACK and OWN.
Perfect. Yes, exactly.
And I thought we were having an internet connection problem when you said ACK, because I was like, what the heck is ACK? But okay, good. So that's really helpful to hear that level of specificity. So recognition and reward, number one problem is don't reward outputs. Well, don't use, within your culture strategy, don't reward outputs, reward behaviors. And those are the behaviors that are directly related to the values.
Exactly. So if you want more innovation, you can't say, I want, innovate harder, people. I don't know how to do that. But acknowledge failure, encourage trying new things. Then you're going to get that innovation as the output.
Okay. And then rituals and cues, those are two, we often hear about recognition and rewards, particularly in conversations like this, but say a little more about rituals and cues.
So rituals are the way that an organization can strengthen and build the synapses of culture. And the synapses of culture are relationships. The biggest question that I get, the question I get most frequently is, how do I scale culture? And if anybody has ever been part of an organization that has scaled, rapidly or not, they will understand that culture is very hard to scale. And so I did a bunch of research to figure out the answer to this question, because I got it a bunch and I was like, I don't know how to do it. And what we found was that when organizations scale, the relationships degrade. There are too many people to have real relationships with, or at least have the energy to do that. And so rituals are the regular, repeated ways that we actually get to know the people that aren't in our immediate vicinity. I read a study once that says, look, if someone is beyond 30 feet from you, they might as well be in a different building. If you have a second floor, you just never see these people. So you've got your literal barriers, you've got your departmental barriers, you've got your levels of leadership, you've got different offices and countries and all these things that are always going to exist. So the company and any leaders inside, managers, need to think about, how do you establish rituals that get people to connect across these barriers, to know who the other people inside of the organization are, to get them to actually, because if you don't have those synapses, why are they synapses? You might ask. Why are they synapses?
Why are they synapses, Josh?
Because if you don't have a relationship, there's no, the thing that you're doing or you're trying to, as a leader, encourage other people to do doesn't spread. And that's when you get those silos, the anti-collaboration, the fiefdoms. That's the problem with that. Not so much where it's we have to cross silos and because we have to teach people how to do these other tasks. We just got to know these other people.
Wow. It's so true that as an organization scales, those relationships diminish. It gets harder. You just can't know everyone. It's not like it was when you were employee 17.
Yep.
And now there's 127. It's going to be a different place. So what you're saying here is establish some things that keep people connected. That's kind of our way of doing things, and that connect back to the purpose, values, and behaviors you were looking for.
Exactly. And I'll say for your listeners, this is the pro tip, which is these relationships will start to degrade once you cross about 50 employees. Once you start to scale beyond 50, that is when people are limited by the amount of energy and willingness they have to connect with the new people coming in. And so often we'll get these startups that are about 250 people and they're like, things aren't working so well. You're like, yeah, because it's not spreading as well as it should.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of one organization, like a ritual that they use that helps accomplish some of this?
Yeah, so I'll give you two. One is the one that everybody knows, and another one is maybe one you've heard about but didn't understand that's the purpose of it. The one that everybody knows is, of course, the office Christmas party or holiday party.
Okay.
Right? This is once a year. It's very expensive. People are outside of their norms, and you get to connect with other folks. I actually, I worked at a big design agency when I was in school, and they had a summer picnic. So not only do they have a winter holiday party, they had a summer picnic. It was wonderful. They bussed us up to a vineyard in Napa, which is a nice part of being in the Bay Area. And, we all got a little tipsy, and I got to connect with people that were not just other interns.
Yeah, and a side benefit to an organization like ours that does executive coaching is we get a lot of phone calls often after those holiday parties to do a little coaching work with people.
yeah, exactly.
But I digress.
So what I'll say is that is the common one, but it doesn't have to be once a year and that expensive. You can also do things amongst your own little team of 5 or 6 folks where you're actually taking, maybe as the manager, you want to take somebody out to coffee, or you want to have a little team get together. Maybe there's you have a team, you have a company volleyball team. That's a wonderful opportunity to kind of get out of the levels and connect with folks. Lunch and learns are another great one that people are doing. They're just not very intentional about it. And so what we want to do, if we think about those, is we want to try to bring in people who don't know each other. And that is how you become intentional about these rituals.
Interesting. All right. And then how about cues?
So cues are a way to make sure that people remember why they're here in the first place. So we get bogged down with emails and quarterly reports and budgets and meetings and deadlines. It's easy to forget all of this stuff. And so cues are behavioral, physical, and digital reminders of what we're trying to accomplish together. So again, you see it all over, right? You've got your mission. We talked about a mission statement or your values on your wall. That's great. That's one way to do that. But there's plenty of other ways to keep people engaged and remember why they're there. How about telling stories at the company-wide stand-up?
Yeah.
Like, what was the founding story? Or what is, tell me a story about the purpose. Like, how are we achieving that? Or maybe there's some other organization that we're aligned with. We have similar purposes. There's all sorts of ways to keep people engaged and remembering what we're trying to do as a team, as an organization, right? As a conglomerate, whatever it is. Because you're just going to naturally forget. It's just going to be the crush of the day-to-day. So it's going to be the organization's job, the leader's job, to make sure that people remember why they're there.
Wow. Now, so purpose, values, behaviors, that's the design element. Then the operationalization piece, recognition, rewards, rituals, and cues. Those are. And doing all that makes for great Mondays?
Yeah, exactly. If you know why you're coming to work and you are fulfilled on many levels, then even Monday can be a great day. Love coming to work when you're aligned with what you're trying to do, your personal values and your organizational values are aligned. Then it makes sense that you want to spend you're going to be spending that much time at work, and that's really kind of I think it's our charge as humans in such a robust, incredible moment in our sort of business history. Yeah. We owe it to our parents and our grandparents who didn't have that much opportunity to choose what they wanted to do, who maybe lost their finger in a, industrial accident or something, right? Where it's like, we now have the opportunity to actually choose what we want to do. So let's do that so that we can feel more fulfilled. We can be happier in our lives.
Awesome. Josh, this was a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for being here. And I just want to speak out to all of our podcast listeners. If you're not a subscriber yet to HR Studio Podcast, you can become a subscriber by going to hrstudiopodcast.com. You'll get notified of new episodes. Also there, you'll find all of Josh's social handles and contact information, his book, Great Mondays. So you can find all the show notes from there as well. Josh, I really want to thank you. This was, we've done a lot of episodes on culture. It's a pretty hot topic, but I have not heard it laid out. The game plan that you have is really, I think, very powerful. It resonates. That's why I think I went a little long on the podcast here, but I couldn't help myself. But we really appreciate your time, your thought leadership, and the good work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to share my message with the world.
Great.
Welcome to HR Studio Podcast. Through bi-weekly interviews with HR executives, thought leaders, authors, speakers, and trend spotters from the world of HR and beyond, we invite you to listen, learn, and leverage. Welcome to HR Studio Podcast, building the next generation of HR leaders. HR Studio Podcast is brought to you by A.J. O'Connor Associates, a trusted human capital consulting partner to emerging, mid-market, and world-class organizations. To learn more, visit us at ajoconnor.com.